What would you do if you saw someone being attacked by a ghost on live TV? GHOSTWATCH, the television program that never was. Produced for BBC One as part of an anthology series called Screen One, GHOSTWATCH was aired on a Halloween night, 1992. It was presented as a documentary-style report on a family being terrorized by a ghostly presence, and what made this broadcast so credibly real was that the host, Michael Parkinson, as well as several members of the reporting crew, were actual members of real-life BBC programs. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Craig Charles, our resident goofball here, was the narrator for the English broadcasts of Takeshi's Castle, which is still some of the best commentary of any broadcast programming.
How on earth could he let that happen? Where's he gonna live? Is he gonna rebuild it? Why did the chicken cross the road?
So with all these well-established and well-liked presenters here, it is therefore unsurprising that, to the casual viewing audience, this appeared to be a completely legitimate program, one which seemed to be escalating out of control and spiraling into a chilling madness. And it wouldn't be a review of GHOSTWATCH if I didn't also mention that yes, it frightened the public so badly that it was never aired on British airwaves ever again, although it was picked up by other countries and is currently available on the Internet Archive, aka the Wayback Machine. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't really touch on the history and background of a film, since I tend to believe that movies should be able to stand on their own merits, regardless of the production circumstances that surround them, but GHOSTWATCH is a very unique case because it purposefully blends a known segment of reality with fiction. And perhaps the most brilliant method used to construct this fantasy is that the advertised call-in number was the actual phone number for BBC One, and with so many people wanting to know whether or not the program was real, the phone banks quickly became overwhelmed, resulting in a busy signal for most of the people calling in. Now, imagine that scenario for a moment. You're sitting at home, it's Halloween night, you're flipping through the channels, and hey, you see a program on the news about a real-life haunting, so you decide to watch for a few minutes, and slowly, you start to see some really wacky shit. So you try to call in, and are left, oh no, with just a busy signal, and there you are, shackled to your television, breathlessly waiting to see what horrors will come next. This situation is exactly what happened to Michael Parkinson's mother, who was watching at the time and had no flippin' idea of what was happening to her son. Now, we may look back on this phenomena with a sense of smug superiority and say to ourselves, hoo, well, there's no way I would ever fall for this tripe. I would simply check Twitter or Facebook or, hey, just my common sense and know that this was all, a hoax. Unfortunately, if you spent any amount of time on the internet, you know how easily people are willing to accept outright lies at face value and spread around misinformation as if it were the absolute truth. However, I am not here to discuss the complex nature of accepting data from a credible source versus getting your garbage from the BBC, and I won't even begin to get into the entire mess that is the possible legal ramifications that, if such a fabrication were to occur today, would surely follow the creation of such a mass panic event. No. Instead, I want us to view GHOSTWATCH as a relic of a simpler time, one in which the world had not yet been traumatized by 9/11, one in which you could go years without having to hear about a school shooting. No. It is 1992. Your television is most likely the main source of your entertainment and news content. It is safe, it is semi-predictable, and things, hey, are mostly okay. After all, the Cold War just ended, the presumed cannibal John Major is currently the Prime Minister of England, and US President George Bush has recently thrown up on the Prime Minister of Japan, Kiichi Miyazawa. Life is simple. And here comes GHOSTWATCH to fuck it all up. The movie offers a sort of flexible reality, where you can either dismiss the force acting as the obvious signs of a hoax, or view the actor's strain as a sign that these are professionals being put in a situation that they are not at all prepared for and are just doing their best to grit their teeth and keep their composure. But whether or not you believe in the reality of GHOSTWATCH is completely irrelevant because it presents the human mind with a very multi-layered situation, one where skepticism is seemingly torn down by the supernatural, but it is being broadcast to us through the medium of television. Which does beg the question, how much power does television and news media in general hold over us? After all, we cannot entirely dismiss everything we see on TV as fabrications, lest we risk shunning important aspects of the world news, but hey, everything we consume through the television is exactly that, something that has been packaged and presented to us with the intent of being consumed. We are currently seeing the zenith of this phenomena in our current times, where any crackpot shithead is able to find enough support through desperate people looking for confirmation bias that the very act of having a platform becomes a substitute for any meaningful or truthful content. In essence, we are now seeing the construction of different perceived realities, due mostly to the fact that you can search for any position, no matter how dogshit, and surround yourself with comforting lies. But Ghostwatch is very different because it seems to be giving audiences a perfectly normal experience, but then our expectations are subverted by the presentation of seemingly raw, unedited footage of something entirely unexplainable. And this is one of the greatest strengths of Ghostwatch, because the horrific events spring out of what would otherwise be just a normal, comfy, cozy fluff piece. It even starts off with a very childish view of the events, and of Halloween in general, with our somewhat lowbrow crew donning funny masks and bobbing for apples, but it does take a series of hard turns into some real nightmare shit when it discusses the lore of murder, suicide, and mania that surround this house. This is a rare instance where analog horror, which is the use of older technology such as VHS tapes and emergency broadcast systems and any other sort of non-HD tech, is, for once, not being used in a found footage style format, but instead in a proper setting of supposed live legitimacy. The audio recordings, infrared cameras, and photogenic analysis are all used to great effect and create a feeling that we're confronting an extrasensory experience with technology that allows us a limited view beyond what we can ordinarily perceive. These people came prepared, but even with their advanced tech, well, advanced for the time, they are only able to catch a mere glimpse of their attacker. In effect, we are meeting the ghost, or ghosts, more than halfway, with the house serving as a battleground between reality and the supernatural, or even hyper-reality. Yet, this tension is kept somewhat at bay by Michael Parkinson, who tries to keep things rational and light, well, at least up until things become too chaotic to control. And the film wastes no time in getting us straight into an instance of the supposing haunting event, with an immediately disturbing instance of the two young girls being attacked in their bedroom. This leads into the main title sequence, which does a series of quick cuts that honestly reminds me a lot of Edgar Wright's films. And these opening scenes are treated more as a joke, with the crew repeatedly saying that they're prepared for a slow night. They introduce themselves with what are now extremely dated references, and present an overall mood of general joviality. Although the actress playing the mother does legitimately seem upset by the events of the past months, which does interrupt the fun and plants an uncomfortable seed in our narrative.
It's wrecked my house, my home, my family.
It's okay. Over to you, Michael.
We are then introduced to the fictional character of Dr. Lynn Pascoe, the authority on the supernatural and the person who has been working with the haunted family directly. She presents us with the defensive stance of a true believer, and you can really feel her desperation to use this rare opportunity to prove that her findings and her profession are valid. She's clearly playing along with the campy nature of the program, but you do feel the strain underneath. This is at its most delicious when she's confronted by a skeptic who, with the unbearably smug attitude of a Reddit atheist, refutes everything she has to say. This guy plays the ultimate straight character, one who is so entirely removed from the situation, quite literally since he's supposedly being filmed for an American studio, that he, in a manner that I can't help but admire, accurately calls parapsychology a giant fucking scam. And these barbs feel very natural to this sort of format, and it's amusing to see Michael attempting to keep his position as the neutral host, even though you get the feeling that he would privately describe ghost research as, quote, pure hogwash. But as the strange acts keep building up around the house, Michael has to work harder and harder to keep the status quo. You can tell he doesn't want this program to get too weird. He is trying, much like any responsible news person would, to keep the public from panicking, which may have actually caused the reverse effect since he does seem rather sincere about his warnings. In essence, Michael has a direct connection to the audience. He is speaking directly for us. He is essentially functioning as someone watching a horror movie unfold. He warns Sarah to stay where she is. He dismisses the wild stories from supposed pranksters that call in, and he tries to piece all of the information together. And this format gets at one of the things I appreciate most about Ghostwatch's structure, which is that we never stay in one place for too long. It is constantly moving us around between talking to the family, conducting interviews with the guests, answering phone calls from keen-eyed viewers, and going over collected data. There are a ton of spinning plates to keep our eyes on. And I really appreciate this, mostly because so many haunted house movies tend to keep us in one location, and Ghostwatch could have easily maintained a constant vigil in the house, but it changes gears all the time, ensuring that you never feel too cozy. And brilliantly, they are always building towards something that the audience can look forward to, either by saying that they'll get a video queued up later in the program, or by taking us away from the house to get an analysis of whatever weird thing we've just seen, or by teasing us with a bit of technology that we have yet to see in action. It feels as if we're trying to keep ourselves focused in 5 different places at once, and this keeps us on our toes. And yet, despite the carefully laid out schedule, there are moments where the segments seem to be organically interrupted, such as when Michael says, they might have time for one more call before touching his earpiece and hearing that no, in fact they have to go straight to the house because things have begun to develop. And I absolutely love these little touches, which go so far in creating a sense that we are essentially watching something happen. And boy, do they start happening. And you might think that they would hide the ghost or ghostly acts until more than halfway through the movie, but even early on there are a number of instances where we see the ghost appearing in the background, one of which is pointed out by Michael and is clearly visible until they re-roll the footage and see that, oh no, it's gone. It was merely a trick of the light, haha, how quaint. And this creates the feeling of, hey, did I really just see that? Which instills a sense of paranoia about things hiding in the background, and you start scanning everything, which makes you extremely familiar with the house's layout, which is a pretty smart move. And speaking of the house, it feels very organically lived in, with Kid's bedroom in particular reminding me a ton of my own sister's bedroom back in the early 90s. But, as nostalgic as the house may be, and as comforting as it might be, they make sure to include a few disturbing elements right off the bat. For example, early on they establish that there is something extremely wrong with the basement, so bad that it needed to be boarded up. And this is where the mother, who has one of the most intense gazes that I've ever seen, delivers a bone-chilling account where she said she was trapped in the cellar and seemingly assaulted by an unseen man. And after she shares her story, the show begins to get a lot of call-ins from other people sharing their experiences with the supernatural or even their knowledge of the house's history. And all the interviews are pretty interesting, but my favorite one comes from this guy with the hidden face that says he found saliva around the house. That's so strange. That's so just quaintly odd. And then the ghost spat on his shoes. he got slimed. He got fucking slimed. And then he says he found quote unquote smeared excrement around the house. And there's just something so genuinely strange and authentic about this account that I can't help but smile. It's great. He got slimed, for God's sakes. But these phone calls and interviews allow us, as the viewer, to create an expanding profile for the ghost. At first we're told that the ghost is merely a specter nicknamed Pipes by one of the children, and that's because the mom said that, the noises coming from the wall, they were nothing more than just the water pipes groaning. But then we start to get the idea that perhaps it's this spirit called Mother Seddons, who was, quote, a baby farmer who drowned children, and that's pretty disturbing as it is. And so while we're trying to sort out the clues being presented, the spooky instances start to build up, such as the crew complaining of strange chills, searching for the source of an unknown scratching noise, finding a circular pool of liquid on the carpet, and noticing that some of their watches have stopped. Much of the first half of the movie takes the tell, don't show approach, which is appropriate for this sort of format, and it works because the things that are described are sort of laid out with this really visceral, uncomfortable language, such as the one story of a boy of 5 being knifed, or a pregnant dog being ripped open on a playground.
There were fetuses scattered all over. The kids weren't late for weeks.
I should imagine not.
Thankfully, though, the movie knows when to drop the subtleties and get us into the real meat. When the elder daughter, Susan, is seen creating some of the phenomena herself, Michael gets rather peevish and pressures the doctor to admit that her research is the product of an attention-seeking child. And this is where, surprisingly, I found that the doctor reaches a semi-unlikable state. She seems so blinded by her desire to find the ghost that the audience, and Michael, who's, the equivalent of our Greek chorus here, gets frustrated with her apparent refusal to admit that she's been had. And to her character's credit, the doctor is supposed to feel as if she's grasping at straws, but it does sort of feel a little bit like, okay, come on, can you give us something here? It's just a little frustrating.
I've seen inexplicable things, 100%, no question.
And this?
Let's not get sidetracked, please.
And it hurts because we wanted to believe in her and her findings, and, she just can't seem to admit that the evidence presented ruins the entire case, which is frustrating. But, this merely serves as the final moment of reality before everything comes apart at the seams.
So I asked for a nightlight. I asked a grown-up, I think it was my grandmother, which made the situation worse in a way because...
Oh yeah, no way. That moment right there is where things fell off the cliff. This is where I got immediate chills. It is a powerfully creepy moment, and it's so, non-creepy. It shouldn't be, but just, oh no, something's happening, and it freaked me out, man. And it's at this point that we are finally given the true lore of the ghost from an unnamed social worker who says that one of the former tenants of the house, named Raymond Tunstall, was his patient, and that Tunstall was a child molester that was released from a psychiatric ward and seemed to have become possessed by the Mother Steadden spirit, adding an interesting new layer to the mix. However, the truly disturbing effect here is that we are told that Tunstall hung himself in the basement of all places, and that he was found 2 weeks later after his body had been eaten by his cats. This final piece to the puzzle allows us to understand the appearance of the cats, why the ghost seems to have its face partially torn off, and why it seems to be attacking the young girls in particular. But even worse, even more chilling, is Dr. Pascoe's realization that the program itself has become a giant seance and has allowed pipes to affect a wide part of the country. Revelations abound, and this is where we finally get to use the infrared camera. When this moment hit, my terror levels spiked dramatically. I was dead certain that something truly horrific would come out of the shadows to confront us. But sadly, this is one of the few moments of the movie that proves to be a letdown, because nothing actually happens with this infrared. Here it is, we're right at the height of our terror, and yet now it seems afraid of going too far, which is, unfortunately, rather disappointing. There is still a payoff, such as, when Sarah Green gets pulled into the basement and is seemingly lost forever, but that's almost expected at this point. But what certainly isn't expected is how the studio seems to friggin' blow up. Everybody disappears or is killed or whatever, and it's just Michael. Michael is left wandering the ruins all alone, despite the fact that Dr. Pascoe and Sarah Green's husband surely would never have left the studio, so you're kind of left, wondering to yourself, where'd they go? I don't know. But here he is, Michael, left alone with the remains of his studio, and we can't even see his full face here. And it ends on a perfect note, with him becoming possessed. And that's Ghostwatch, baby! One of my favorite movies of all time. Despite there being some elements that don't quite pay off as much as I would have wanted to, there is still so much here to love. Now, it isn't exactly a gorehound's delight, and it may be a bit too slow for some people, but thankfully, this ain't their review, it's mine, and I say, damn, this movie's great! And before I go, I want to gush about a few things that I particularly enjoy. I really like the background and the props here in the main studio. There's a perfect goofy Halloween stage dressing thing here that's just so wonderful. I also appreciate how, as the program goes on, Michael's face is shown, deeper in shadow, growing ever and ever grimmer. He smiles less and less, and it's clear that, things are getting real serious. And I also think it's neat that when the door to the basement is finally uncovered, it not only opens on its own, but it looks really, disgustingly wet, almost like organic. It's really gross. And finally, the thing that I probably appreciate the most is that there are a few segments where there are very few cuts, which makes the scenes feel as if they're naturally playing out in real time. And in particular, I found this part with Craig Charles to be the most impressive because it's all one long shot. It's almost exactly 4 minutes long without a single cut to be found. The choreography and the timing here, it is just pure excellence. And on that note, I think we can say that this movie has indeed been reviewed to death. But, this is only part of the conversation, my dear viewer. What do you think about Ghostwatch, and how would you react to seeing something like this today? Let me know in those comments. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. If you'd like to see more of my upcoming content, then please consider subscribing, or, hey, even possibly supporting me on Patreon, where there are such added benefits, such as the voting polls, insights into my creative process, and some other cool things as well. Either way, thank you all once again for everything you do, and please, have a lovely day.